The crystalline walls of the Zephyrian arena hummed with anticipation as thousands of alien spectators filled the floating observation pods. Princess Zara Thyss of the Zephyrian Empire stood at the edge of her royal viewing platform, her 6 arms gracefully crossed as she gazed down at the combat ring below. Her scales shimmered with an iridescent blue-green that marked her as royalty among her people, and her 4 eyes tracked every movement with predatory precision. "Another challenger seeks to prove themselves worthy of an audience with you, Your Highness," announced General Korak, his massive reptilian form bowing slightly. The draconian military leader's voice carried the weight of centuries of conquest. "Though I must confess, this one is unusual." Princess Zara Thyss tilted her elegant head, causing the neural tendrils that crowned her skull to sway gently. "Unusual how, General? We have seen warriors from every corner of the galaxy. The crystalline beings of Zirion, the energy creatures of the Void Nebula, even the machine gods of the Synthetic Collective. What could possibly be unusual about this challenger? It's a human, Your Highness." The princess paused, her 4 eyes blinking in sequence. In all her 300 years of life, she had never encountered this species. The Zephyrian Empire stretched across 47 star systems, and their influence reached even further through trade and diplomacy. Yet this name was completely foreign to her. "Human," she repeated, testing the word on her forked tongue. "I am not familiar with this species. From which system do they hail?" General Korak consulted his holographic display, his clawed fingers dancing across the interface. "According to our intelligence networks, they originate from a small blue world in the Outer Rim territories. A system called Sol. The planet is designated Earth in their language. They are a relatively young species, Your Highness. They have only achieved interstellar travel within the last 50 standard years." Princess Zara Thyss laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. 50 years? And they dare to challenge the greatest warriors in the galaxy? How delightfully naive. What weapons do they bring? Surely they must possess some advanced technology to compensate for their obvious inexperience in galactic affairs. That is what makes this even more interesting, Your Highness. According to the challenge registration, the human requests to fight with only primitive weapons. No energy shields, no plasma weapons, no gravitational manipulators. They have requested what they call medieval weapons, metal blades, projectile weapons, and basic armor. The princess stared at her general in disbelief. Throughout the galaxy, the trial of worth was legendary. Warriors from hundreds of species had attempted to prove themselves worthy of an audience with the Zephyrian royal family. The challenge was simple in concept but brutal in execution: defeat 3 of the Empire's greatest champions in single combat. The prize was beyond measure, a chance to request a single favor from the most powerful military force in known space. Most challengers brought the finest technology their civilizations could produce. Molecular disruptors that could unmake matter at the quantum level. Energy shields that could deflect the blast of a dying star. Weapons forged in the hearts of black holes that could cut through the fabric of spacetime itself. The idea that someone would voluntarily handicap themselves with primitive weapons was not just unusual, it was unprecedented. Has this human been informed of the caliber of opponents they will face? Princess Zara Thyss asked, her voice carrying a note of genuine concern. Despite her reputation as a fierce and uncompromising leader, she took no pleasure in senseless slaughter. Indeed, Your Highness. They have been shown recordings of previous trials. They have seen Champion Vorthak the Destroyer tear apart a crystalline warrior with his bare claws. They witnessed Champion Isara the Mindrender reduce a psychic entity to gibbering madness. They observed Champion Theron the Stormcaller summon lightning that could shatter moons. When asked if they wished to reconsider their weapon choices, the human simply smiled and said, "I think these will do just fine." Princess Zara Thyss moved to the great window that dominated her viewing platform. Below, the arena floor stretched out like a miniature world unto itself. The combat zone could simulate any environment, from the crushing depths of ocean worlds to the zero-gravity void of space. Environmental hazards, hostile wildlife, and terrain advantages were all part of the challenge. The arena had seen the deaths of some of the galaxy's finest warriors. Tell me about this human, General. What do we know of their species? Their capabilities? General Korak's display expanded, showing a three-dimensional hologram of a human male. The figure rotated slowly, allowing the princess to examine the challenger from all angles. What she saw was unremarkable. The being stood upright on two legs, possessed two arms, and had a head that seemed proportionally too large for its body. Its skin was a pale pink color, and sparse brown hair covered the top of its skull. Most striking to the princess was how fragile the creature appeared. Humans are a carbon-based bipedal species, General Korak began, reading from his database. They possess a single heart, basic sensory organs, 2 eyes, 2 ears, 1 nose, 1 mouth. Their bone structure is primarily calcium-based, their musculature appears to be protein fiber bundles. Most concerning, Your Highness, is their apparent lack of natural weapons. No claws, no fangs, no natural armor, no toxic secretions. They appear to be what our xenobiologists classify as soft targets. Princess Zara Thyss felt a growing unease in her stomach. The trial of worth was designed to test the greatest warriors the galaxy had to produce. It was not meant to be an execution of some naive primitive who had stumbled into something far beyond their comprehension. General, I want you to speak with this human personally. Explain to them exactly what they are facing. Make it clear that there is no dishonor in withdrawing. Many of the galaxy's greatest warriors have chosen not to attempt the trial after learning the full details. I have already done so, Your Highness. The human listened patiently to my explanation, asked several questions about the rules and limitations, and then confirmed their intention to proceed. What questions did they ask? General Korak consulted his notes. They wanted to know if there were any restrictions on movement within the arena. They asked about the atmospheric composition and gravity settings. They inquired whether they would be allowed to study the arena layout before the trial began. And, most strangely, they wanted to know if they could bring what they called field rations, apparently some form of portable nutrition. Princess Zara Thyss found herself intrigued despite her concerns. The questions suggested a level of tactical thinking that seemed at odds with the apparent foolishness of challenging galactic champions with primitive weapons. Did they seem afraid? Nervous? Not in the least, Your Highness. If anything, they appeared excited. When I described the capabilities of our champions, the human's expression became what I can only describe as eager anticipation. Most unsettling. The princess turned away from the window and began pacing, her 6 arms moving in the complex gestures that indicated deep thought among her people. Something about this situation felt wrong, but she could not identify exactly what was troubling her. General, in your military experience, when an enemy appears to be making a tactical error so obvious that victory seems assured, what is your first instinct? The old soldier's eyes narrowed. To assume it is a trap, Your Highness. Precisely. Yet what trap could a primitive species from the outer rim possibly set? What could they know that we do not? What advantage could they possess that our intelligence networks have failed to detect? Before General Korak could respond, a young aide burst onto the platform, his breathing labored from running. Your Highness! The human has arrived in the preparation chambers. They are requesting permission to begin the trial immediately. Princess Zara Thyss exchanged a look with her general. So eager? Most challengers spend days in preparation, studying their opponents, making final adjustments to their equipment. The human states they have prepared enough, Your Highness. They seem confident. The princess made her decision. Very well. If this being is so determined to proceed, then we shall accommodate them. General, prepare the arena. Set the environment to standard combat parameters: Earth normal gravity and atmosphere. If this human wishes to die, at least let them die in conditions familiar to their species. As her subordinates hurried to carry out her orders, Princess Zara Thyss remained at the window, watching as the arena began to transform. The floor reconfigured itself into a varied landscape of hills, valleys, scattered boulders, and patches of what humans might recognize as trees. She found herself wondering if she was about to witness a tragedy or something else entirely. In the depths of the arena's preparation chambers, the human challenger was conducting a final inspection of their equipment. The weapons laid out before them would have seemed primitive to any galactic observer: a long metal blade they called a sword, a curved piece of wood and string they referred to as a bow, arrows with sharp metal points, and armor made of overlapping metal plates. What no observer could see was the calculation in the human's eyes. What they could not detect were the countless hours of study the challenger had devoted to understanding not just the arena and its champions, but the fundamental assumptions that every galactic species held about warfare, about strength, about what it meant to survive. The human picked up their sword and tested its weight, then smiled. It was not the smile of someone facing certain death. It was the smile of someone who knew something that no one else in the arena suspected. Above in her viewing platform, Princess Zarati HYSS felt a strange shiver run through her nervous system. For just a moment, she wondered if perhaps she should have paid more attention to that little blue world in the outer rim. She wondered what secrets might lurk in the history of a species that had clawed its way to the stars from such humble beginnings. But the thought passed quickly, dismissed as pretrial nerves. After all, what could one soft, primitive human possibly do against the greatest warriors in galactic history? She was about to find out. The arena's atmospheric processors hummed to life as they adjusted the environment to Earth-normal conditions. Princess Zarati HYSS watched from her elevated platform as the massive blast doors at opposite ends of the arena began to slowly iris open. From the eastern gate, Champion Vorthak the Destroyer emerged, his massive form casting a shadow that stretched across half the combat zone. Vorthak stood nearly 4 meters tall, his body a fusion of organic muscle and cybernetic enhancement that represented the pinnacle of draconian military evolution. Scales as hard as starship armor covered his natural hide, while servo-assisted limbs gave him strength capable of crushing steel. His claws had been replaced with monomolecular blades that could slice through diamond, and his cybernetic eyes could track targets moving at hypersonic speeds. He had never lost a battle in 3 centuries of warfare. From the western gate came the human. The contrast was so stark that several spectators actually laughed. Where Vorthak was massive, the human appeared almost delicate. Where the champion was armored in scales and metal, the human wore what looked like primitive plates of worked iron. Most amusing to the observers was the human's height. They barely reached Vorthak's chest, and their slender build suggested they weighed perhaps 1/10 of their opponent's mass. The human walked to the center of the arena with an easy, relaxed gait that suggested either supreme confidence or complete ignorance of their situation. They carried their metal sword in one hand and a round shield in the other, while a quiver of arrows and the curved bow were strapped to their back. Their face was hidden behind a simple metal helmet, but their movements were fluid and controlled. "Attention, warrior," Vorthak's voice boomed across the arena, amplified by his cybernetic vocal cords. "I am Champion Vorthak the Destroyer, Slayer of Legions, Breaker of Worlds. I have faced the greatest warriors from 47 star systems and emerged victorious from every battle. You face certain death. I offer you one final chance to withdraw with honor." The humans stopped walking and tilted their heads slightly, as if considering the offer. Then, they reached up and removed their helmet, revealing the face underneath. Princess Zarati HYSS leaned forward, surprised to see that the challenger appeared to be female, a woman with short brown hair and calm brown eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of the arena and her opponent. "I appreciate the courtesy," the human woman replied, her voice carrying clearly across the arena despite having no technological amplification. "But I've come a long way for this opportunity. My name is Sarah Chen, and I represent the human species. I'm ready to begin whenever you are." Vorthak's cybernetic eyes focused on the small figure before him. In his centuries of combat experience, he had learned to read opponents, to detect their strengths and weaknesses, to identify the tactics they might employ. Yet as he studied this human, he found himself puzzled. She showed no signs of fear, no aggressive posturing, no apparent strategy for dealing with his overwhelming advantages in size, strength, and technology. "Very well," Vorthak rumbled. "Know that I will make your death swift and honorable." "That's very thoughtful of you," Sarah replied, settling into what appeared to be a basic fighting stance. "Though I should mention, you might want to pace yourself. I understand there are 2 more champions waiting after you. The absolute confidence in her voice sent a ripple of unease through the spectators. Princess Zara Thyss found herself gripping the railing of her platform, her 4 eyes fixed on the small human figure below. The combat began with Vorthak doing exactly what every observer expected. He charged. His massive cybernetic legs propelled him forward at a speed that would have been impossible for a creature of his size without technological enhancement. His monomolecular claws extended to their full length, capable of shredding any known armor. The attack was straightforward, overwhelming, and had never failed to end a battle within seconds. Sarah Chen did something that no one expected. She ran. Not away from Vorthak, but at an angle, moving with a speed and agility that seemed impossible for her species' apparent physical limitations. As Vorthak's claws swept through the space where she had been standing, Sarah was already 10 meters away, circling around a cluster of artificial boulders. Vorthak pivoted, his sensors tracking her movement, and charged again. Once more, Sarah evaded, this time leaping over a fallen log with a grace that made the movement look effortless. She continued to move, always staying just out of reach, never allowing Vorthak to close the distance. To the spectators, it initially appeared that the human was simply delaying the inevitable. Vorthak was faster than any unenhanced being should be able to match, and his stamina was virtually unlimited thanks to his cybernetic power systems. Eventually, they assumed, the primitive human would tire, and the champion would claim his victory. But, as the chase continued, something began to change. Vorthak's movements, while still powerful, started to become slightly less precise. His charges were taking longer to redirect when Sarah evaded. His breathing, amplified by his vocal systems, was becoming slightly more labored. Princess Zara Thyss realized what was happening with growing amazement. General Korek, she called to her aid, what is the power consumption rate for Vorthak's cybernetic systems during sustained high-intensity combat? The general consulted his technical specifications. His power cells are rated for approximately 45 minutes of continuous maximum output operation, Your Highness. But, surely this primitive creature cannot maintain her current pace for that long. How long has the combat been running? 17 minutes, Your Highness. Princess Zara Thyss turned her attention back to the arena. Sarah Chen was still moving, still evading, and, remarkably, she didn't appear to be tiring at all. Her breathing was elevated but controlled, her movements remained precise and fluid, and, most unsettling of all, she was beginning to take more risks, coming closer to Vorthak with each pass. It was during Vorthak's 18th charge that Sarah made her first real offensive move. As the massive champion thundered toward her, she suddenly pivoted and ran directly at him, closing the distance at a sprint. Vorthak, committed to his charge, couldn't adjust quickly enough. At the last possible moment, Sarah dropped into a slide that carried her between his legs, and, as she passed beneath him, her sword flicked out in a precise, surgical strike. The blade found the gap between Vorthak's natural scales and his cybernetic enhancement at the back of his left knee. It was a tiny target, one that should have been impossible to hit during such a dynamic maneuver, yet Sarah's blade sliced through the critical power conduit that fed energy to his leg servos. Vorthak stumbled, his left leg failing to support his weight properly as power to the cybernetic assistance was interrupted. He caught himself and spun to face his opponent, but Sarah was already moving again, circling around a stand of artificial trees. Impossible, General Korek breathed. The targeting precision required for that strike, our computers indicate a probability of success at less than 0.003%. Princess Zara Thyss said nothing, but her eyes never left the human fighter. She was beginning to understand that there was something fundamentally different about this species, something that their intelligence networks had completely missed. The battle continued for another 20 minutes. Sarah continued her pattern of evasion and brief, surgical strikes. Each attack targeted a specific vulnerability, a power coupling, a sensor array, a joint between armor plates. None of the strikes were devastating individually, but their cumulative effect was undeniable. Vorthak's movements became progressively slower and less coordinated as his systems suffered increasing damage. What was most remarkable to the observers was not just the precision of Sarah's attacks, but her apparent understanding of draconian cybernetic technology. She seemed to know exactly where the vulnerable points were located, exactly how much damage was needed to disrupt each system, and exactly when to strike for maximum effect. "General," Princess Zara THYSS said quietly, "how could a species from the Outer Rim possibly possess detailed knowledge of our champion's technical specifications?" I do not know, Your Highness. That information is classified at the highest levels of military security." The end came suddenly. After 38 minutes of combat, Vorthak's power systems finally reached critical drain levels. As he lunged forward in one final, desperate attack, his cybernetic enhancements failed entirely. The massive champion, suddenly, relying only on his natural draconian strength, found himself off balance and overextended. Sarah Chen was waiting for exactly that moment. She stepped inside his reach, her sword driving upward in a perfect thrust that found the one spot where Vorthak's natural scales had been removed to accommodate a cybernetic interface. The blade penetrated just deep enough to sever the connection between his cybernetic nervous system and his organic brain. Vorthak the Destroyer, Slayer of Legions, Breaker of Worlds, collapsed to the arena floor, his body paralyzed by the precise disruption of his augmented nervous system. He was alive, but completely unable to continue fighting. Sarah stepped back and lowered her sword, breathing heavily but clearly far from exhausted. She looked up toward the royal platform and offered a small, respectful nod to Princess Zara THYSS. The arena fell completely silent. In the 3,000-year history of the Trial of Worth, no challenger had ever defeated a champion through such methodical, calculated tactics. Most victories came through overwhelming force or superior technology. But this human had won through something else entirely, an understanding of her opponent that bordered on the supernatural, combined with a physical capability that defied her species' apparent limitations. Princess Zara THYSS found her voice first. "Champion Vorthak has been defeated. The human challenger may proceed to the second trial." As medical drones swarmed onto the arena floor to attend to the fallen champion, Princess Zara THYSS turned to General Korak. "Send a message to our intelligence networks. I want everything, and I mean everything, we can learn about human military history, human combat tactics, and human physical capabilities. And I want it before the second trial begins." "Yes, Your Highness." "Should I also alert champions Asarat and Theron to adjust their strategies?" Princess Zara THYSS looked down at the small human figure who was already preparing for the next challenge, checking her equipment with the methodical precision of a seasoned warrior. "Alert them, yes. But, General, I'm beginning to suspect that our champions may need more than adjusted strategies. I have a feeling we've severely underestimated what humanity is capable of." Below in the arena, Sarah Chen was indeed preparing for the next challenge. But she was also smiling, and if anyone had been close enough to hear, they might have caught her quiet words to herself: "1 down. 2 to go." Just like the simulations back home. The princess was right about one thing: they had severely underestimated humanity. But even she had no idea just how severely. The intelligence reports began flowing in during the 30-minute respite between trials, and each new piece of information made Princess Zara THYSS more uneasy. General Korak stood beside her platform, his face grim as he read from multiple data streams simultaneously. "Your Highness, the initial reports are concerning. Human military history appears to be far more extensive than our preliminary surveys indicated. According to our deep-scan intelligence probes, humans have been engaged in continuous warfare for virtually their entire recorded history." Princess Zara THYSS felt her scales ripple with unease. Continuous warfare? That seems unlikely. Most species achieve galactic spaceflight only after establishing planetary peace. The data is quite clear, Your Highness. Humans appear to have developed their technology not despite constant conflict, but because of it. Every major advancement in their science has been driven by military necessity. They have been fighting wars for over 5,000 of their years, developing increasingly sophisticated tactics and strategies. The princess watched as Sarah Chen moved through what appeared to be warm-up exercises in the arena below. The humans' movements were fluid, controlled, and spoke of years of training. But, what struck the princess most was the complete absence of tension or nervousness in the challenger's posture. What else have we learned? General Korak gestured to his aide, who activated a holographic display showing various anatomical diagrams. Human physiology is far more complex than our initial scans revealed. Their muscle density is approximately 40% higher than our estimates suggested. Their cardiovascular system appears to be capable of sustaining peak performance for extended periods. Most significantly, their nervous system processes information at speeds that approach our own cybernetically enhanced champions. But, they showed no advanced technology. No genetic modifications. No cybernetic enhancements. That is correct, Your Highness. These appear to be baseline human capabilities. Princess Zara THYSS absorbed this information with growing concern. What about their tactical capabilities? Their combat knowledge? This is perhaps the most disturbing aspect of our findings, General Korak continued. Humans appear to have developed what they call asymmetrical warfare to an unprecedented degree. Throughout their history, smaller human forces have regularly defeated larger, better-equipped opponents through superior tactics, preparation, and what they termed situational awareness. The princess turned to study Sarah Chan more carefully. The human was now examining the arena's modified layout for the second trial, her eyes tracking across the terrain with the methodical precision of a military surveyor. Every few seconds, she would pause to focus on a particular feature, as if cataloging potential advantages or disadvantages. General, show me the specific examples of this asymmetrical warfare. The holographic display shifted to show historical battle scenarios. Throughout human history, we see repeated examples of small forces defeating much larger ones. Their military philosophers have written extensively on concepts such as force multiplication, tactical adaptation, and exploiting enemy weaknesses. They appear to have elevated the art of fighting against superior opponents to a science. Princess Zara THYSS studied the battle diagrams with growing amazement. Scenarios where human forces numbering in the hundreds had defeated armies numbering in the tens of thousands. Naval battles where smaller, more maneuverable ships had devastated larger fleets. Air combat where individual pilots had achieved victory against overwhelming numerical odds. But, how is this relevant to single combat? These are examples of military strategy, not individual fighting ability. That is what we initially assumed, Your Highness. However, closer examination of human combat sports and martial traditions reveals that they apply the same principles to individual combat. They have developed dozens of fighting systems specifically designed to allow smaller, weaker individuals to defeat larger, stronger opponents. The arena's announcement system crackled to life. Prepare for the second trial. Champion Isara the Mindrender is entering the arena. Princess Zara THYSS watched as the northern gate began to iris open. Unlike Vorthak's dramatic entrance, Champion Isara simply materialized in the arena, her psychic abilities allowing her to teleport directly from her preparation chamber. The ethereal champion appeared as a vaguely humanoid shape composed of shifting energy patterns, her form constantly flowing between different configurations. Isara the Mindrender was perhaps the most feared champion in the Empire's history. Her psychic abilities allowed her to directly assault an opponent's consciousness, creating overwhelming terror, confusion, or even madness. She could read thoughts, predict movements, and manipulate emotions. Many challengers had been defeated without Isara needing to physically touch them, their minds simply couldn't withstand her psychic assault. Sarah Chen looked up at the shimmering form of her second opponent and did something that made every spectator lean forward in surprise. She smiled. Interesting, Sarah said, her voice carrying clearly across the arena. I was wondering how psychic abilities might factor into this challenge. Isara's form coalesced into a more stable configuration as she focused her attention on the human. When she spoke, her voice resonated directly in the minds of everyone present, bypassing their ears entirely. Small creature, Isara's mental voice carried undertones of amusement and condescension. I sense no psychic defenses in your mind. No mental training. No barriers or shields. You are completely vulnerable to my abilities. Surrender now, and I will grant you a merciful defeat. Sarah adjusted her grip on her sword and settled into a ready stance. "Thank you for the offer, but I think I'll see how this plays out." What happened next defied every expectation the spectators held about psychic combat. Isara reached out with her consciousness, preparing to flood Sarah's mind with paralyzing terror. Psychic assault was always the most efficient way to end a battle. Few beings could maintain combat effectiveness while experiencing the full horror of their deepest fears made manifest. The psychic energy struck Sarah's mind and, simply, stopped. Not because Sarah possessed psychic shields or mental barriers. Not because she had some technological defense. The assault stopped because Sarah's mind processed the attack, acknowledged it, and, then, calmly dismissed it as irrelevant to her immediate tactical situation. Isara's form flickered with surprise. Impossible. You should be experiencing your worst nightmares. You should be paralyzed with terror. "Oh, I am experiencing them," Sarah replied conversationally, beginning to circle her opponent with the same methodical movement pattern she had used against Vorthak. "The drowning nightmare, the falling nightmare, the one where you're back in school and realize you forgot to study for the final exam." Very creative. But, you see, humans have this interesting relationship with fear. Sarah suddenly sprinted forward, covering the distance between them with startling speed. Isara, rattled by the failure of her primary attack, barely managed to teleport away before Sarah's blade swept through the space she had occupied. "Fear is useful," Sarah continued, tracking Isara's new position and adjusting her approach accordingly. "It keeps us alive. It makes us careful. But we don't let it control us. We've learned to function despite it." Isara attempted a different approach, projecting waves of confusion and disorientation. Most opponents would find their thoughts scattered, their coordination disrupted, their ability to track her movements compromised. Sarah paused for a moment, shook her head as if clearing away cobwebs, and continued her pursuit. "That one's annoying, I'll give you that. But humans have been dealing with confusion and disorientation for millennia. We call it the fog of war, and we've developed techniques for fighting through it." Princess Zara Thyss watched in fascination as the battle unfolded. Isara continued to attempt various forms of psychic assault, emotional manipulation, sensory overload, memory disruption, and, each time, Sarah would briefly acknowledge the effect, then continue fighting as if nothing had happened. "General," the princess called quietly, "are humans naturally resistant to psychic abilities?" General Korak was consulting his incoming intelligence reports with increasing urgency. According to this data, humans appear to have no natural psychic abilities whatsoever. However, their military training includes extensive conditioning for what they call psychological warfare. They appear to have developed techniques for maintaining combat effectiveness despite extreme mental stress. The battle in the arena was unlike anything the spectators had ever witnessed. Isara, frustrated by her inability to affect her opponent's mind, was forced to rely on her teleportation abilities to avoid Sarah's relentless pursuit. But teleportation required concentration, and Isara was discovering that Sarah's tactical approach was specifically designed to disrupt that concentration. Sarah wasn't trying to predict where Isara would teleport next. Instead, she was systematically limiting Isara's options. Each position Sarah took, each angle of attack she pursued, reduced the number of safe locations Isara could materialize. The human was essentially herding her psychic opponent into an increasingly smaller area of the arena. "She's treating the battle like a mathematical problem," Princess Zara Thyss realized aloud. "She's calculating probabilities, optimizing her position, forcing her opponent into a predetermined tactical situation." The end came when Isara, finding her teleportation options reduced to a single safe location, materialized exactly where Sarah had predicted she would. Sarah was already in motion, her sword describing a perfect arc that intersected with Isara's manifestation point. The blade passed through Isara's energy matrix at precisely the right frequency to disrupt her molecular cohesion. Isara, the mind-render, terror of 1,000 worlds, collapsed into incoherent energy patterns, her consciousness scattered and her ability to maintain physical form completely disrupted. She was alive, but it would be hours before she could reassemble her psychic matrix sufficiently to resume combat. Sarah stood over her fallen opponent, breathing hard but clearly still capable of continuing. She looked up toward the royal platform and offered another respectful nod. The arena fell silent once again, but this silence was different from the stunned quiet that had followed Vortak's defeat. This was the silence of beings who were beginning to realize that they might be witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. Princess Zara Thyss found herself speaking without conscious decision. "How," she called down to the arena. "How did you resist her psychic abilities?" Sarah looked up at the princess with those calm brown eyes. "Your Highness, humans have a saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. We've been afraid of things in the dark for 100,000 years. We've been confused by complex problems for just as long. We've learned that you can be afraid and still function, confused and still think, overwhelmed and still fight. It's not that we don't feel these things, it's that we don't let them stop us." The princess stared down at this small, seemingly fragile being who had just defeated two of the galaxy's most feared champions using nothing but primitive weapons and an apparently unbreakable will. "General," she said quietly, "I want you to personally review the specifications for Champion Theron the Stormcaller. I want to know every capability, every weakness, every possible tactical approach. Your Highness, surely no single being, regardless of species, could possibly defeat Theron. His power levels exceed." "General," Princess Zara Thyss interrupted, her voice carrying the full authority of her position, "that human has just proven that our understanding of combat capability is fundamentally flawed. I am beginning to suspect that we are not witnessing the trial of some primitive challenger. I believe we may be seeing a demonstration of why humanity has survived long enough to reach the stars." Below in the arena, Sarah Chen was already preparing for the final trial, checking her equipment one last time. But she was also looking up at the sky above the arena with an expression that could only be described as anticipatory. Princess Zara Thyss followed her gaze and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the arena's atmospheric systems. For the first time in her 300-year life, she was beginning to wonder if her empire might have made a terrible mistake in underestimating the species from that small blue world in the outer rim. And, somewhere in the depths of space, several other ships bearing human markings were maintaining a careful, hidden position just outside the Zephyrian system's sensor range, waiting for a very specific signal from their representative on the planet below.